76 Because it is all too fragile. 6. Chapter 76. Because it is all too fragile. 6. Perhaps thanks to the sudden intruder, Periuro finally managed to break free from Olisardar's oppressive aura. Even though his body still trembled from the frost dragon's chilling breath, he forced himself to move, dragging his frozen limbs to escape with all his strength. Cough, cough. That white dragon, the one who dared call himself Dragon King, clearly did not care whether they lived or died. Periuro knew he could not perish here. His ambitions had been shattered, but at the very least, he had to ensure the survival of his clansmen. There is an old human saying, united we stand, divided we fall. Normally, the more they banded together, the stronger they became. But now, it was the opposite. If they gathered, they would only draw down greater destruction. Against the wrath of the frost dragons, just like with the red dragons before, the Quagga would be helpless, slaughtered to the last. They had to scatter. To flee, to survive, and to pass on the warning. Even if he died, the future of the clans must endure. With that grim resolve, Periuro forced his numbed body to move. Meanwhile, the intruder had already provoked Olisardar's fury. The temperature in the palace dropped further, from cold to deadly chill. Frost spread again across Periuro's fur, biting his metal-like hide. He shivered, on the verge of freezing to death, yet anger burned in him. At the frost dragon, at the intruder, at this wretched fate. And then he saw it. I'll make you understand, even if it's rough. The intruder's words echoed. Periuro's bloodshot eyes widened as he witnessed the cloaked figure swelling, expanding, blackness surging out like living shadow. He rubbed his frost-encrusted eyelids in disbelief, but the vision did not fade. The darkness writhed, swelling until it swallowed the dwarven citadel, engulfing even the ceiling, still rising higher, devouring space itself. Panic overtook him. The tide of shadow rushed toward him, and he scrambled desperately to escape. The palace shook, pillars collapsing, ceilings caving, the flood of black swallowing everything. Periuro barely managed to flee before it consumed him. But within seconds, something massive struck him, hurling his body through walls like a ragdoll. Stone shattered, walls crumbled, blood filled his mouth as his vision flashed red and black. Miraculously, he lived. His hide, stronger than adamantite, and his hardened body had spared him from being pulped outright. Curling up for protection had been impossible, but sheer resilience kept him alive. Moments later, though it felt like endless hours of torment, the crushing force ceased. Instead, he found himself hurled into the open air, smashing through wall after wall until he tumbled across the ground outside. Cog. Cough. Ghh. Every nerve screamed in pain. It was worse than any hammer blow he had suffered in his life. What could possibly have caused this devastation? But his thoughts ended there. The sky itself seemed to collapse, pressing down with unbearable weight. Periuro couldn't even scream. His body flattened against the earth, his bloodshot eyes catching one last vision. The dwarven palace, reduced to rubble. From the ruins, a colossal shadow rose. Black, immense, with molten crimson veins coursing across its body like rivers of lava. It was no creature. It was a mountain of despair. An existence whose mere presence forced life itself to abandon hope. That was the last thing Periuro saw before his mind surrendered completely. From the ruins of the collapsed palace, a colossal black figure slowly rose. For such a massive body, its movements were impossibly light and smooth as it lifted its head. HMPH, a bit cramped. It was Tiamat, shaking his head lightly. The dwarven royal palace was no small structure. Hundreds of meters wide, dozens of meters high, it was one of the finest masterpieces of dwarven craftsmanship and artistry. Yet, it was far too small to contain his body. The moment he deactivated the effect of Tarnhelm, his body had swelled as if it would burst apart. His equipment automatically returned to his inventory, and then the change, the transformation, began. First, his skin turned black, splitting into countless cracks, each forming into scale-like plates of armor. The scales thickened rapidly, and with them his legs, torso, arms, and head expanded dozens, then hundreds of times over. Like storm clouds rolling in on a summer day, the space darkened as his body swelled, a human form becoming a titanic dragon. As his expanding body smashed through pillars, walls, and ceilings, the central section of the palace collapsed entirely. Shards and debris rained against him but failed to even scratch a single gleaming black scale. Against his overwhelming physical resistances, let alone the perfected dragon skin, stone could do nothing. The black figure erupted from the palace's heart, raising his long neck skyward. Tiamat spread his vast, shadowed wings, as large as his body itself, and with a single beat, he unleashed a gale that tore through the ruins. Debris was hurled away, buildings swept aside, devastation wrought across the city. From the heart of those wings, golden eyes opened, pupils slit into burning vertical lines. His gaze swept across the devastation, then wavered slightly. Perhaps, that was a bit much. He had only stretched, flexing his body as if waking from slumber, and yet the entire area lay in ruin. He hadn't realized his simple motion would treat the surroundings like fragile toys. In Yggdrasil, there had been no such effects. Unless he performed an attack motion, even fierce wingbeats wouldn't break so much as a tree. But here, this was different. But to me, it's little more than broken toys. From his towering height, the once grand city appeared nothing more than a miniature model. His body stretched easily beyond 100 meters in length, wingspan twice as vast. Before such immensity, everything else was insignificant. Still, guilt pricked at him. The dwarves would one day return to this city, and he had destroyed it thoughtlessly. The red dragons had at least left it intact, but the master himself had been the one to ruin it. A loss of dignity, and more than a little shame. As Tiamat brooded in silence over this regret, the rubble before him stirred. Phwat! From the debris, a white dragon's head burst forth. Though caked with dust and rubble, its scales gleamed pure and unblemished. Around the ruins, more dragons thrust their heads free, shaking off the rubble as they rose. There were about 20 in total, the number of life signatures Tiamat had already sensed when he first entered the palace, filtering out the countless lesser reactions scattered across the city. What in the world are you? An illusion? A phantom? A fake? Just what are you? As you see, a dragon. Don't be absurd. No dragon like you could exist. Olisardark's eyes bulged wide. Even as the enormous shadow before him took the unmistakable form of a dragon, he couldn't believe it. A body as vast as a mountain, black scales streaked with molten crimson veins like rivers of fire across a volcanic slope. A head crowned with jagged horns like a king's diadem. Wings so vast they seemed to blot out the heavens themselves. Every feature screamed of something impossible, something that should not exist. And yet, here I stand before you. The thunderous voice rolled across the capital, shaking its very foundations. The pressure of the dragon fear suffused the air, overwhelming. Olisardark's kin collapsed instantly. His 3 wives, his proud son Transilate, even his pathetic eldest Hujinmal crawling out of a ruined spire, all dropped to the ground, wings folded, tails curled, heads buried into the floor in submission. Only Olisardark kept his head raised, stiffly resisting. But it was an empty defiance. His neck felt like it would snap under the weight of that pressure. His entire body had turned rigid, frozen. The only thing holding him up was pride, the pride of one who dared call himself Dragon King. What is this? What is this thing? Inside, he screamed. Never had such a dragon existed in all his kind's memory. Even the greatest of his ancestors, in their final, bloated years of slothful gluttony, had only grown marginally larger than himself. Nothing like this. But the black colossus before him, its head alone dwarfed him. Its jaws looked wide enough to swallow him whole. The obsidian scales and that impossible mass radiated invincibility. No conceivable weapon, no magic he knew, could mar that hide. Could it be one of the mythical sovereigns? A true dragon emperor whispered of only in legend. No, impossible. HMPH. You claim to know the difference in our stature. Then allow me to return the favor. Dragon Fear, Level 4. This was no mere aura of intimidation. It was domination made manifest, a force that transcended spirit and crushed flesh itself. Olisardark's head slammed down as if the sky itself had collapsed on him. His colossal body was driven into the ground, stone floors buckling as if gravity had multiplied 100-fold. What remained of the dwarven palace buckled and imploded under the crushing force that radiated outward in a perfect circle from Tiamat's form. This is the difference in stature. Prostrate yourself. Grovel. Beg for your life. KHH. Cock. Father. Guck. Frost dragons spat blood beneath the overwhelming pressure, their bodies unable to withstand it. Olisardark forced his head upward again, trembling, his neck scales cracking and splintering under the strain. Every measure, size, might, aura, power, Tiamat was overwhelming. And still, Olisardark endured, by pride alone. The massive black head descended with fluid, effortless grace, until Tiamat's snout loomed directly above him. Despite his mountain-like bulk, his movements were elegant, natural, every motion precise and without strain. The golden eyes narrowed, amused. This is our difference in height. Do you finally understand, dwarf? 77 Because it is all too fragile. 7. Chapter 77 Because it is all too fragile. 7. A crushing sense of darkness bore down from above, and Olisardark's body trembled. His entire frame creaked under the pressure, scales shattered, bodily fluids seeped out through the cracks in his hide, yet the suffocating weight and despair pressing upon him were so immense that he could not even register the pain. But Olisardark had not yet given up. With desperate effort, he forced his jaws open. He could not, must not, acknowledge defeat. He was the White Dragon King, ruler of the greatest territory in these mountains, the sovereign destined to one day place the world beneath his claws. For such a being to yield to a sudden calamity like this was unthinkable. Don't mock me. From between his fangs, a white radiance surged. The ultimate weapon of Dragonkin, the breath weapon. A deadly chill condensed in his throat, so fierce that even his wives, his daughters, and his sons, all pressed to the ground under the oppressive force, shuddered at the frigid aura. The full might of a frost dragon, a strike worthy of one who claimed the title of White Dragon King, gathered into a single blow. Frost spread across the ground, the very air freezing over. Yet Tiamat only gave a faint, amused laugh. A breath. Very well. I'll permit it. Go ahead, use it. He even stepped back, as though to say he wouldn't interfere. Hope flared in Olisardark's bloodshot eyes. To scorn him went only so far, surely not even this monster could ignore the power of a dragon's breath. For Olisardark knew well the true nature of that weapon, the final, greatest armament of his kind. It was not merely elemental force, it was destruction itself, an explosion of power that transcended attributes. Long ago, when Olisardark had been young and foolish, he had nearly died wandering recklessly, stumbling upon a frost giant. He had been moments away from death or capture, from being broken and raised as a slave. It was his desperate breath weapon that had saved him. Even that giant, resistant to cold, could not withstand it. The blast had pierced its chest, leaving a massive hole. That was the unrivaled supremacy of Dragonkin's breath, a force none dared belittle. Now, far stronger than in his youth, with his full might poured into it, his breath was beyond measure. Gathering every ounce of power into a single point, Olisardark unleashed it. A pillar of white light erupted, a beam that froze and annihilated everything it touched. The Frost Dragon clan, watching, felt a surge of hope. Surely this was victory. But, how is this possible? Olisardark's wives, Mianatalan Hubines, Munwinia Iris Slim, and Kilistran Denshusha, all stared in shock, their voices trembling, unable to close their gaping mouths. The breath, that absolute power, blazed forth in a torrent of white. Yet before the black scales of Tiamat, it faltered. The shining aura failed even to frost over his obsidian armor. It merely streamed uselessly, dissipating like mist. Olisardark emptied his strength in vain, collapsing under the relentless pressure, his body prone on the ground. Above him, golden eyes curved in mocking amusement. So this is what it feels like to take damage. Cold, numbing, bothersome. Be bothersome. My breath, my life's very breath, dismissed as nothing but. Olisardark muttered in despair. His ultimate weapon, the sovereign roar of his kind, had been reduced to a trifling nuisance. Before him, massive jaws opened wide, as though ready to swallow him whole. Tiamat had never even intended to fight seriously. That fleeting sensation, the novelty of actually feeling damage, was, unexpectedly, even enjoyable. It wasn't pain. More like the mild chill of pressing ice against one's skin, a little cold, a little numbing, nothing more. And yet, something else pressed upon his mind. A subtle, ominous awareness, that remaining in this form, too long was dangerous. As if something vital would be overlaid, altered. He decided to end it quickly. Then, it's my turn. Take this. Within his crimson maw, molten like lava, a deeper black swirled. A darkness darker still coiled within that void, ready to erupt. Holding back, far less than the force he had used to carve a hole through the mountains, he exhaled almost lazily, a soft gust of breath. Tiamat's breath weapon. An inky black aurora spilled forth, swallowing light, devouring space. The frost dragons tried to flee. But the dragon fear still shackled them. Even the attempt to escape was denied. Pinned beneath that crushing weight, they knew only the despair of insects about to be crushed. A chorus of, no. Ah. Save. A black aurora spread in waves and blanketed the area. Before the Frost clan could even fall into despair, the spreading black light swallowed them and their consciousness quietly sank into darkness. And shortly after, where everything had ended, Tiamat scratched his head awkwardly after slipping the Tarnhelm back on and returning to human form. Was that a bit much? A little excessive, Master. Aya's reproachful voice reached him, and Tiamat's hand scratched his head even faster. After transforming into a dragon, in that brief span he had done something outrageous. The tone he'd used, honestly, he'd feel embarrassed thinking about it now, but at that moment it had felt perfectly natural. He had spoken like a movie dragon, like a tyrant, disdainful, crushing, humiliating. It had felt only right to belittle and trample the other. But, in another corner of his mind, he realized that if he kept that up something fundamental about him might change. So he hurriedly put the Tarnhelm back on and returned to his human form. Only then did he grasp how dangerously close to a tipping point he'd been. That mindset, the feeling of the human who was Tiamat becoming the dragon Tiamat, the sense of, not being myself, was not unpleasant. The feeling of shedding all constraints felt like enormous joy and fullness. It was like being lifted up, like becoming something greater, an intoxicating sensation. Like the first time tasting alcohol in real life, a light, buoyant euphoria and inexplicable omnipotence filled him. But when he reverted to human form, that fullness vanished. In its place came a strong sense of danger. The dragon form is his true form now, but staying in it too long seemed perilous in many ways. Seal the dragon form for a while. The urge to taste that fullness again tugged at him, but the sense of losing himself if he stayed that way was too risky. He might do things without a second thought. Around Tiamat, the area he'd swept over, was utterly devastated. Even controlling his power, the surrounding 100-odd meters had become shallow craters. The frostbitten, mangled frost dragons strewn about were proof. The chief white dragon at the center had been struck by Tiamat's breath weapon with as little augmentation as possible. Tiamat had deliberately held back and used no boosts, yet the leader had been erased without so much as ash remaining. Because the blow had been concentrated on that one target, some other frost dragons had survived. That made disposal tricky. What should we do with the survivors? If they'd all been dead, it would be simpler. The fact some had survived left him uneasy. Should he just kill them all? He considered it, but now that he was back to human form, he felt a twinge of pity. Thinking it through, he had come merely to look around, taken some insults, lost his temper, then savagely beat them and ended up killing some. At the time, their scornful looks and attempts to steal items had angered him. The feeling of wanting to show, I'm the bigger one, had made him remove the Tarnhelm and reveal himself, and that had revealed how dangerous the dragon form was. In dragon form, human sensibilities vanished. It was as if every limiter shattered. No matter how many self-imposed restrictions he set, Tiamat himself was practically an eldritch calamity in that shape. In it he became a tyrant who could wield force and violence without hesitation. The frost dragons had been the victims. Well, those dragons weren't exactly peacefully occupying the dwarf capital, so one could call it karmic payback, but the party you hold responsible isn't the dragons, it's the dwarves. He did feel a pang of conscience for killing them at will. What shall we do with these ones, Aya? Bring them into Shinshi. Is that okay? There would be concerns, feed, space for rearing, Shinshi large, but accommodating 20-odd dragons at will is a bit much. But Aya answered matter-of-factly. Even if they're monstrous, they're still dragons. They'll be useful in various places, I think. Is that so? Then handle it as you see fit. Understood, Master. Holstein will be delighted, he wanted new livestock. Livestock. Yes. I believe that's a fitting treatment for them. The thought of turning dragons into livestock felt questionable at first, but Tiamat soon nodded. These half-broken creatures were weak anyway. Having witnessed his true form, they couldn't simply be left roaming free. Better to have them taken in by Shinshi. And, truthfully, the idea piqued his curiosity. Dragons, as livestock, how ironic. In Yggdrasil, dragons were treasures in their own right. Their hides, bones, blood, and drop items, all of it carried immense value. If such resources could be harvested regularly through breeding and domestication, it would be nothing short of a boon. And as for the things within this city, I will arrange for their disposal. Is that acceptable? So long as Shinshi's prosperity won't be harmed, leave the dwarves' possessions untouched. Understood. Then I will handle everything else aside from the dwarves' belongings. Fine, then I'll leave the rest to you, Aya. Yes, Master. And please, contact me whenever you require anything. Right. Always watching me, and yet telling me to contact her. Suppressing his unease, Tiamat gave a stiff reply before opening a gate. It was time to return. He had only stepped outside briefly, but far too much time had slipped away. The others were probably growing concerned. He recalled seeing Colton and the dwarven landlord already drunk out of their minds, while that fellow named Rohaim still couldn't seem to relax. I suppose I'll just smooth things over somehow, he thought, stepping into the dimensional gate. Meanwhile, Dean had just concluded negotiations with the dwarven commander. From the start, the commander had tried to conceal the truth, but Dean had pried every secret out of him through relentless pressure and intimidation. The information he obtained was as follows. 1. The Quagga were preparing to unleash their full might to annihilate this dwarven city. 2. The dwarves had no military strength capable of stopping them. 3. The dwarves, realizing this, had intended to secretly hire the Dragon's Dream Party, hiding the truth while driving away the Quagga at minimal cost. Dean had dragged this information out of a half-broken commander, and afterward, filled with irritation and contempt, briefly considered leaving immediately. But he decided such a choice would wait until he had heard his lord's opinion. Wait, you can't just leave like this. Silence. Ah. The murderous intent that flared from Dean belonged to one who had stepped beyond mortal limits. Compared to that, the commander was utterly insignificant. Faced with such overwhelming killing intent, he shrank back in fear. Is this truly the killing intent of a human? The two adventurers before him had been powerful enough, but the presence of this party leader was on an entirely different level. That sheer aura alone stole the breath from his lungs and left his mind clouded. So this is the power of a great house. Damn it, if only I had been honest from the beginning. The commander cursed himself for trying to deceive them and for the Regent Council's foolish decision. But the hammer had already fallen. He could do nothing but watch blankly as Dean walked away. Soon, the party would gather and depart the Dwarven Kingdom. And he had no strength to stop them. For the dwarves, it was effectively the end. Once these people left, they would have no means to resist the Quagga's onslaught, and the kingdom would inevitably fall. What the commander did not yet know was that all the threats driving the dwarves to the brink of destruction had already vanished from the mountains without a trace. 78 Even amid shaking and confusion 1. Chapter 78 Even amid shaking and confusion 1. The royal capital of the Re-Estais kingdom had once fallen into chaos. The horde of demons that assaulted the capital, the 8 fingers who summoned them, and the emergence of the archdemon Jaldabaoth, a being whose power far surpassed the realm of heroes, shook not only the kingdom but the entire world. A threat greater even than the evil deities of the evil deities war 200 years ago had appeared. With the arrival of such an enemy of the world, all could do nothing but despair. But the gods were not merciless. When the archdemon Jaldabaoth appeared, so too did a hero who could stand against him. The dark hero, Momin. A warrior clad in jet-black armor, wielding twin great swords, with a crimson cape fluttering behind him, an invincible and undefeated champion. Only months earlier, he had appeared in Rantel with his partner, the mysterious beauty, Nabe. Registering as adventurers with no known past or origin, in just a short span he had risen from the lowest rank of copper plate to the legendary rank of adamantite plate, accomplishing countless quests. His might and abilities seemed limitless, and in the end, he even drove away the archdemon Jaldabaoth, who had threatened the kingdom. Though he could not destroy the fiend outright, to repel him alone was an achievement beyond measure. Neither the soldiers defending the capital, the king's personal warrior division, the adamantite-ranked adventurer team Blue Roses, nor even the mighty House of Dragon's Dream, guardians of the capital, had been able to withstand Jaldabaoth. That was how great Momin's deed was. His renown soared ever higher, while the fame of Dragon's Dream plummeted. For even in the turmoil of the capital, the man who had been called the strongest in the world, the 6th head of the great house, Monkey Spanner El Dragondream, had fallen, a fact the entire world knew. Though no body remained to bury, his funeral was held, with only his cherished weapon, Clumsiness Slayer, mockingly tossed back by Jaldabaoth, laid in his coffin. With the patriarch gone, the family, which had endured for 150 years, could not remain unshaken. Its central pillar destroyed, its main forces scattered, Dragon's Dream inevitably faltered. And in that moment, the 2 heroes of darkness, along with their followers, entered Dragon's Dream. Though opposition was great, many argued that absorbing them was the only way to preserve the house's honor. Thus, darkness became part of Dragon's Dream. And then, Rot set down his pen, exhaling deeply. His forehead wrinkled with fatigue as he pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose, weariness etched across his young face. He was too young to already bear wrinkles, but recent days had brought him no rest. Since the death of the patriarch, all the matters of the house had fallen upon him. The late lord had entrusted him with the authority to summon and lead the party before his passing. Handling everything alone was breaking his back, even with his hardy body and stamina. And worse, the comrades who should have borne the burden alongside him, the senior members of the party, were absent. Yet the too was his own doing. He had been the one to prevent their return. What a headache. His hand trembled as he rubbed his face. A month had passed since the Lord's death, and in that time, Dragon's dream had changed greatly. First came confusion. The house had been held together not just by its century and a half of history, but by the transcendent might and charisma of its patriarch. With his passing, all reverence collapsed. Already, several subordinate parties had demanded independence. Rot barely managed to hold them back, but the unity of the house scattered like flour spilling from a sack. He was no monkey spanner. Nor was he a dean. Though he had knowledge and ability, he lacked the force and charisma to unite them all. At this rate, the house might splinter completely. So, in desperation, he accepted darkness into the family. When the famed warrior of darkness humbly requested entry, Rot, parched for stability, accepted, like a dying man seizing sweet water. But that choice would prove fatal poison. A mistake he could not have foreseen. What are you writing? Quote, exclamation mark. It's you. At the sudden voice, Rot snapped his eyes open, hand instinctively going to the hilt at his waist. But recognizing the speaker, he slowly withdrew it. There had been no sound, no sign, no presence, yet a man now stood in the room. Dressed neatly in black, glasses glinting upon his long, sharp face, he bore an unreadable smile. One of the followers who had come with the dark hero, Momin, when he joined the house. At first, Rot thought little of him. But at some point, this man had risen to prominence, suddenly holding influence over all matters of the house, as though he grasped everything in his hands. What is it this time, Lord Demiurge? It's nothing serious. Lord Momin has been rather concerned about you, so I came to check on your well-being. There's no need for concern. I am, quite healthy. You say that, yet you look rather worn down, The man stepped closer, drawing something from his breast pocket. A small vial of violet liquid, which he placed upon the desk, his smile unchanged. What is this? A newly developed restorative potion. Please, drink it. Though, of course, I won't force you. My thanks for your consideration. I'll drink it if I need it. He bowed his head slightly, lowering his gaze from the vial. A recovery tonic, it seemed a harmless enough claim. Surely this man wouldn't bother with petty tricks. And yet, the sweat dripping down his body was unstoppable. In this man's presence, his body betrayed him, sweat poured as if it could not be hidden. Tension, fear, unease, dread, all surged beyond control, refusing to be suppressed. Demiurge circled behind the desk, standing behind him. Rot felt the weight of eyes on his back, scanning the papers he had been writing. A quiet chuckle followed. Fufu, I see. A report on the house's status. As expected, you are quite capable. Thank you. That will do. You are doing well enough. I'll be counting on you to continue. And then the man's presence vanished. The door had not opened, nor had the window. No sound, no trace. But Rot knew, he was gone. Only then did Rot finally exhale a shuddering breath. Cold sweat drenched him, soaking his clothes until they clung unpleasantly to his skin. Yet he had no will to wash, slumping back into his chair as if all strength had been drained. It had been 1 month since Lord Monkeyspanner's death. 2 weeks since Momin of Darkness entered the house. Much had changed since then. No, everything had changed. The house, the capital, the Re-Estais kingdom itself. Outwardly, nothing seemed so different, yet the truth was otherwise. And only a handful, like Rot himself, sensed it. But no one spoke of it. And even if they did, it would never be heard. Look at himself, reduced to this state. A faint groan escaped his lips. His mind and heart were drowned in fear, vigilance, mistrust, all manner of negative emotions. Yet beneath them, another current stirred, one wholly opposite. Joy, ecstasy, delight, submission, yearning. Simply by hearing their words, obeying, and following them, his mind squeezed forth feelings of elation. He knew this was unnatural. And yet, he could not resist. If anything, perhaps only he recognized the dissonance at all. Others did not. Everyone's minds had changed. Those who once mourned the patriarch, raged at his death, or held their own schemes, one by one, they had begun to praise the dark hero Momin, to follow him, to be swayed by him. Only Rot retained even a fragment of awareness of the gap between his former self and his present one. And that awareness made it all the more terrifying. His body trembled, paralyzed with fear. Still, with shaking hands, he tried to organize his papers. At last, on the corner of his desk, he scrawled a single phrase. They are demons. He carved those words desperately, to preserve his current will. So that even if he were forced into submission, he would not forget that he resisted. Trembling, teeth clenched until his gums bled, Rot clung to that tiny act of defiance. 79 Even amid shaking and confusion 2. Chapter 79. Even amid shaking and confusion 2. Leaving the office, Demiurge curled his lips upward as though nothing in this world could hinder him now. It didn't take long for his sly smile to warp into something strange and grotesque, but it hardly mattered. There was no one left in this mansion who would so much as question such a grin. Ah, truly delightful. His footsteps echoed lightly along the grand corridors of the Dragon's Dream estate, each strike of his shoes ringing like the beat of a dance. He was genuinely overjoyed, brimming with satisfaction. For Rot, who only moments ago had been trembling in fear before him, it was both misfortune and a strange mercy. To please this demon meant, for now, at least, no further harm would come to his body. Nor would Demiurge need to touch him again. He cherished those who were clever, especially those who struggled desperately like insects cornered in the dark. For he was a demon, an embodiment of malice who reveled in corrupting the wise, staining the pure, and dragging the innocent into depravity. All his efforts, of course, were for the sake of the supreme being he served. Yet it could not be denied that his methods carried a flavor of his own cruel preferences. Yes, I like this very much. His rapturous smile curved into something sadistic, the gleam from behind his round glasses radiating menace. A foul aura seemed to scatter with his every step, so thick was his delight. Ever since the grand operation, all his plans and preparations had surged forward, accelerating toward their objectives. Logistics, manpower, funds, intelligence, all the things Nazarick had once struggled to acquire in this new world had now been secured in abundance through the absorption of Dragon's Dream. The gains exceeded even the Supreme One's advance expectations. Despite its reputation as a great house, even Demiurge had not realized just how vast it was until they devoured it whole. The wealth alone dwarfed everything stolen from the royal capital's vaults and the Eight Fingers hoards during the upheaval. Within their warehouses, not coins, but rectangular gold ingots stacked so high they touched the ceilings, 2 stories tall. Gems, yes, but also adamantite, orichalcum, mithril, all refined into gleaming ingots, piled to the brim. And that was not all. Rare herbs preserved with stasis magic, ores, precious monster materials, potions, spices, silks, dyes, even seeds of valuable crops, nothing was lacking. This acquisition had transformed Nazarick's finances overnight. The Supreme Being himself remarked that the total wealth gained from the capital rivaled the colossal sum once spent to resurrect Shaltir. Every guardian remembered the mountain of gold coins drawn upon in Yggdrasil for that resurrection, and they all rejoiced, showering praise for such a monumental achievement. Nor was it limited to wealth. Magical items filled their storerooms. Enchanted weapons and ornaments piled in rooms until they overflowed. Each of them, by the standards of this world, could be hailed as legendary artifacts. To Nazarick's treasury, such trinkets were worthless, but their value was not the point. Most of these were transferred into the treasury. Some items, however, were distributed as samples to select subordinates. During this process, the head artisan of Nazarick, an overseer of the Great Tomb's workshops, filed a startled report. These weapons, the craftsmanship is on par with my own. Then, could it be? A true production class exists here. Yes, Demiurge. Find the roots of this power at once. As you command, Supreme One. The master upon the throne laughed, ordering him to trace the source hidden behind Dragon's Dream. Yet even now, though they had seized the husk of the house, its true foundations remained veiled. Their enemies' origins were concealed with exceptional care. To drag them into the light would require more time. The shortage of manpower in Nazarick also contributed to the delays. It had taken more than a week just to sort, classify, and catalog the vast sums of coin, jewels, ores, herbs, spices, and other treasures they had seized. And that was only the beginning. The Library of Dragon's Dream had preserved information gathered across nations over a span of 150 years. Through mental magic, Rot had revealed that the shelves had been slated for systematic incineration by order of the late Patriarch. Yet aside from several sections where the most critical documents had already been destroyed, the rest remained intact. It seemed Monkey Spanner, as the princess's intelligence had suggested, had intended to vanish from history, burning much of the archive and crucial records before his end. Reconstructing and rewriting the remainder consumed vast time, and then Nazaryk's scholars had to sift out what was truly useful. To manage this Herculean task, 3 of Nazaryk's greatest minds had been mobilized. Demiurge handled personnel selection and document restructuring. Albedo oversaw the servants in cataloging the library's intelligence. And Pandora's actor took charge of accounting and treasure management. Thanks to that division of labor, I even had a little leisure to indulge my hobbies. In that process, Demiurge savored a most entertaining occupation, culling. Those who were useful were swayed, broken, or reshaped to remain. Those who were not were quietly eased out, through retirement, returned to their homeland, or dispatched on long-term assignments from which they would never return. In the course of a month, he harvested nearly 50 such individuals, each considered formidable by this world's standards. The Supreme One had ordered that rot not be touched, and indeed rot proved invaluable, rallying the house when it might have shattered, making it easier to absorb, and smoothing the rise of their master to the status of 7th Patriarch. Demiurge even admitted to a personal fondness for the man. The demon's greatest delight was to corrupt and subjugate the competent. The others, however, were of little worth. By Nazaryk's measure, even this world's strong amounted to little more than pests, barely on par with skeletons that spawned naturally in the tomb. A handful exceeded that baseline, but none by much. Yet even vermin required careful handling. Here, Demiurge put to use the expertise he had honed while overseeing the bicorn sheep. From his harvest came a bounty of new material. Their compliant cooperation allowed him to secure resources of remarkable quality. Compared to scrolls made from the hides of Holy Kingdom sheep, capable of sealing only third-tier spells at best, their contributions promised far greater. He withheld immediate mass production, instead using the samples for experiments and data collection. The findings were illuminating. Even within the same species, the hides of stronger, purer, and more magically attuned individuals yielded higher-grade parchment. Considering the scarcity of materials such as dragon hide, this discovery was highly encouraging. Demiurge quivered with anticipation. His master's command, to secure resources in this world capable of rivaling Yggdrasil's items, might soon be within reach. The thought of presenting such results to the Supreme One filled the demon with ecstasy. Ah, he will surely be pleased, yes, how glorious that will be. Of course, such minor, sordid details were not worth troubling his exalted ears. The Supreme One cherished the innocent and unsullied with unmatched benevolence. It was the duty of his left hand, hidden in shadow, to deal with the filth, that the right hand might remain unstained. Half the organization was already consolidated. He could not afford to spend longer, an entire month had gone into this work alone. Now the foundation was stable, and it was time to advance to the next stage. But that next step could not be taken without his sanction. Plans had been laid, but to enact them without leave would be unthinkable blasphemy. Closing off his musings, Demiurge activated a gate. Preparations for the next phase were already underway. Straining every faculty, he would not allow himself to disappoint his master. Then, next shall be the matter of these hidden sponsors, and perhaps the Empire. Ah, at last, an opponent worthy of his labor. The demon's sneering smile vanished into the shimmer of the gate. 80 Even amid shaking and confusion 3. Chapter 80. Even amid shaking and confusion 3. The famed adventurer house, Dragon's Dream, a great clan, whose prestige and renown rivaled even the highest nobility and royal families, had recently suffered a great calamity. In the chaos later named the Capital Disturbance, the 6th Patriarch, Monkey Spanner El Dragondream, stepped forth to resolve the crisis. Yet despite his reputation as the strongest man in the world, he fell to a mighty archdemon of terrible power. His beloved weapon was mockingly tossed back as a token, but the man himself perished without leaving behind a will or naming an heir. Without its patriarch, the clan wavered. But soon a new pillar emerged. The unparalleled adventurer, known to the world as the Dark Hero, Momen, entered of his own will and, with the support of many within, was enthroned as the new head of the clan, now hailed as Momen El Dragondream. It was he who had driven back the same archdemon that had slain the former patriarch, and since then he had achieved countless other feats. Absorbing him as clan lord not only restored the fading honor of Dragon's Dream but also saved it from the brink of collapse. Some decried it as unbecoming of a great clan, but those voices quickly died out. After all, it was Momen himself who had requested to join. And so, the adventurer who became patriarch now lay sprawled on the grand, soft bed prepared for him in the resplendent master's chambers of the great house. Hua, ha. He rolled on blankets woven from the feathers of a giant cockatrice, a beast rated at threat level 60, and surrounded by priceless furnishings and ornaments. Yet Ains, who bore the guise of Momin, felt no comfort at all. Compared to the overwhelming majesty of the great tomb of Nazarik's ninth floor, this mansion was nothing. When he decided to reside here temporarily, several guardians had voiced their opposition for that very reason. The jet-black armor of the Dark Hero was set aside. In its place, he wore an ornate robe of indigo and violet, a magical artifact far superior to the armor in value. But this was his true form, the skeletal body of Ains ul Gaun, supreme ruler of the Great Tomb, last sovereign of Nazarik. And yet, even on that skull, the signs of dismay were plain. Ah, what am I supposed to do now? He had just pulled off one of his greatest successes. The incident the world now called the Capital Disturbance had, in truth, been orchestrated behind the scenes by Nazarik. Not that it was planned from the start. He had only ordered Demiurge to prepare some operations, and upon receiving reports that something was already in motion, he had seized the opportunity to make a grand move. When unforeseen events unfolded in the royal capital, he accepted Demiurge's request, and let the matter escalate into a grand spectacle. The result was beyond expectations. Yet even now, Ains could not shake the feeling of a thorn caught in his throat. It would have been nice to know about this a bit earlier. He recalled the moment when, after the entire affair concluded with spectacular success and he had returned to Nazarik, Sebas had approached him with a report. At the time, Ains had been in very high spirits. Even though he had failed to subdue Monkey Spanner and bring him over, the overall results had been outstanding. They had slain a level 100 NPC without leaving evidence, acquired multiple divine and legendary class items, and secured vast resources from the capital to bolster Nazarik's finances. But above all, they had laid the groundwork to devour the great clan itself. To absorb Dragon's dream would be more profitable than seizing the Re-Esti's kingdom entire. All that remained was to methodically consume the clan, then uproot whatever remnants hid behind them. With its level 100 linchpin slain, and no sign of any players, optimism seemed justified. And so, basking in triumph after a rare large-scale event mission had ended in success, he was ill-prepared for Sebas's next words, which pierced his good mood like ice. Lord Ains, there is something I must report. What is it, Sebas? It is, about that matter. Sebas's report, offered with hesitation, was shocking. They have no intention of hostile action. What? Why are you only telling me this now? I'm sorry, Lord Ains. At the time there was too much confusion, and I did not know of the plan to deal with him, so I could not report it. I offer my life for this responsibility. It isn't your fault, Sebas. If anyone is to blame, it's my fault for not informing everyone of the plan in advance. Sigh. Go in and see for yourself. Yes, Lord Ains. Having calmed Sebas, Ains sank into thought. Was there a possibility of resolving this through dialogue? He clicked his tongue at his own foolishness. Of course, if Nazarik's NPCs possess intelligence, then the NPCs of another guild surely possess comparable intellect. And besides, those others are far more veteran than Nazarik is in this world. They must have accumulated knowledge about this world and worked to adapt to it. In short, there had been room for negotiation. But they had launched a surprise strike first, executed their scheme, and then planned to capture and interrogate. Hold them first, then interrogate or persuade, if necessary, kill. When he reached that point in his reasoning, Ains felt a brief chill. How did it come to this? Using the world item to kidnap Dragon's Dream's patriarch, Monkey Spanner, then torturing him for information and either persuading him or killing him, that was something the old Suzuki Satoru would never have imagined doing. Killing people was not unprecedented for him. When he first arrived in this world he had killed, via heart domination to save the Emote sisters and felt little about it. He had summoned death knights and slaughtered soldiers. He had captured those who opposed him, those radiant paladins, and taken them to Nazarik as living test subjects, employing magic, machinery, and biological experimentation without hesitation. Posing as Momin, he had even embraced and killed Clementine and disposed of those who annoyed him or were otherwise useful. He'd used and sacrificed adventurers of mithril rank, lizardmen, soldiers, and townsfolk whenever expediency demanded it. Yet, disturbingly, no real emotion welled up. What surfaced instead was a cold, clinical curiosity about the consequences of his actions, the gains and losses to Nazarik. His regret over Monkey Spanner wasn't compassion, it was a detached appraisal of how the man's death would affect Nazarik's interests. Even that sensation quickly faded. Ains placed his hand on his skull. As he'd sensed in Emote Village, this erosion of feeling wasn't solely because he'd become an undead, some other, subtler factor was at work. He pushed the notion from his mind and returned to his deliberations. The phrase, "they do not wish to be hostile," yielded only fragmentary information. After consulting with Demiurge, the cunning demon proposed several hypotheses. First, even if those others do not know the true nature of Nazarik, they have identified the existence of a powerful entity like Yggdrasil and realize someone is targeting them. Second, they probably don't know Nazarik's exact strength, but they may have a rough lower-bound estimate. Third, judging from Monkey Spanner's statements, and from the opponent's combat power and equipment levels, that other faction was likely a sizable guild. There also seems to be no current player presence. As centuries passed, any player-affected forces would have died out, while those unaffected would have retreated and hidden somewhere. Fourth, given all the circumstances, these people do not wish to be hostile to Nazarik. If dialogue had been possible earlier, trade or exchange might have been feasible. Those are the four premises. The fourth is an uncertain possibility, but under these assumptions, their strength remains unknown and could present a threat to Nazarik. That was Demiurge's assessment. Ains's headache deepened. Had he blundered? Since falling into this world, he had pursued world domination boldly and efficiently, but now he saw the costs of prioritizing efficiency above all else. Use what is useful, discard what is not. When something lost utility, he simply abandoned it. He'd left the black sword unrevived and allowed it to die rather than expend resources to save it. If he had truly wanted to recover someone, there were always ways, yet Ains had chosen efficiency and disposed of people he liked for cold practicality. He reflected on the cumulative consequences, the captured NPCs, the harvested intellects, the experiments, the sacrifices, every one of them measured only in terms of utility to Nazarik. After that, it was the same process on repeat. By accepting Demiurge's stratagems and compromising where needed, things had gone relatively well. Up until now, that approach had worked. This world was filled with people who, compared to Nazarik's forces, were pitifully weak, laughably so. They were so frail that even looking down on them felt excessive. In such a world, chasing efficiency over everything had never been a problem. But in truth, there might have been more measured ways to deal with matters, even if they took more time. Instead, he had chosen the path of ruthless efficiency, acting in ways befitting his karma alignment of evil 500 regardless of morality or ethics. And now those choices had come full circle, striking back at him. It was unavoidable, perhaps. He himself was of extreme evil alignment. Those who served under him also leaned toward evil, and it was only natural that gathering such subordinates and leaving matters to them would lead to outcomes like this. Still, the weight of regret pressed heavily on him. He had been arrogant without even realizing it. Having fought only against weaklings, he had grown conceited without noticing. And now, here he was, caught in the consequences of that arrogance. What would Touch Messon have done in my place? The thought of an old companion flickered across his mind. Touch Me, the guild's great strategist, the peerless brain of Ains ul Gaun. If Momonga had been the guild leader, the organizer, the one who kept the guild itself running, then Touch Me was the one who shaped its actual policies, hunting plans, PK strategies, and diplomatic moves. It was he who had sown discord among enemy guilds, spreading false intelligence to turn them against one another, breaking their alliances apart before they could threaten Ains ul Gaun. He had even been the one to codify PK tactics into theory, passing down the very methods that Momonga still relied on. If only he were here. Of course, Ains missed all of the other 41, his guildmates who had once guided and fought alongside him. But at this moment, it was the strategist's absence that hurt the most. When it came to strategy, plots, and schemes, truth be told, Ains was lacking. He had combat strength, yes. But the broad vision to see the grand game board, to maneuver entire powers like pieces across it. He had never possessed that. The only reason he now stood as the supreme ruler of the great tomb of Nazarik was because of the systems carried over from Yggdrasil and the unwavering loyalty the NPCs bore to him because of their settings. Their absolute faith, combined with his bluffs and borrowed authority, had carried him this far. But now that an enemy had appeared whom he could not simply crush beneath overwhelming power, but would have to treat as an equal, he felt the limits of his ability closing in. Anxiousness is the seed of failure. Calm, logical thought is what must always be maintained. Settle your mind, broaden your view. Do not be trapped by your thoughts, circulate them, Momonga-san. Yes, I know, touch Messen. Agitation breeds failure. Complacency invites defeat. Rashness is the wellspring of mistakes. Repeating the words once spoken by the guild's tactician, Ains forced his thoughts into order. After all, the skill emotional suppression only numbed intense feelings, it did nothing to clarify tangled thoughts. He laid out the situation again. He could not consult Demiurge, Albedo, or the others, they saw him as a perfect, omnipotent god, and he dared not shatter that illusion. Nor could he trust anyone from this new world. In the end, he could only think for himself, wrestle with it alone. He had accepted this mantle, however accidentally, and so he bore the responsibility. As ruler, there was no other choice. And then, knock knock. A sound at the door. Followed by that ever-calm yet unreadable voice. Ains-sama. I was told you were looking for me. Ah, enter, Demiurge. Yes, in the end, he lacked the ability. He could not deny it. And so he had no choice but to lean once again on Demiurge. While steeling himself to deflect suspicion and draw out a plan he could use, Ains quickly rose from the bed and sat upright, giving permission for the devil to enter. 81 Even amid shaking and confusion 4. Chapter 81. Even amid shaking and confusion 4. Did you summon me, Ains-sama? As always, the wise demon bowed deeply, glasses flashing as he did. Seeing that dependable figure filled Ains with quiet pride. How fortunate it was that this NPC existed. On paper, Albedo and Pandora's actor might have intellects comparable to Demiurge's, but in practice, when it came to trust, no one could compare to the supreme strategist himself. Every time he relied on Demiurge's advice, Ains silently thanked the one who created him, Ulbert Alan Odal, one of the 41 supreme beings who had left Ains Ulgaun relatively early. Thank you, Ulbertson. He might have been hot-tempered, constantly bickering with Touch Messen, but in terms of ability, there was no denying his genius. Yes, I have spent a considerable amount of time pondering this matter, Ains began, trying his best to sound solemn and commanding. However, the nature of this issue is such that it would be unwise for me to decide alone. I require your counsel, Demiurge. How could my paltry insight be of use to the boundless wisdom of Ains-sama? Of course it will be. Your opinions are always of great help to me, Demiurge. As always, I ask that you speak freely and without hesitation. And if you could give me a neat, perfect answer right away, that'd be even better. Outwardly, he spoke with grandeur, but inwardly, Ains's thoughts were in complete disarray. Still, it wasn't entirely a lie. He had spent time thinking about the issue. And it was true that it was too important to decide on a whim. The only problem was, he had absolutely no idea what to do. I am deeply honored by your words, Ains-sama, Demiurge replied with a calm, reverent smile. And yes, I assume this summons concerns that matter, does it not? Indeed. That is the reason I called you here, Demiurge. So, what are your thoughts? I regret to inform you that I will need more time, Ains-sama. Bowing low enough for his forehead to nearly scrape the floor, the demon spoke in a tone filled with regret. Unfortunately, our manpower remains woefully insufficient. Many of those who handled clerical tasks have perished or vanished, and there are no proper replacements. We've brought in additional personnel from Nazareth, of course, but even that is not enough. Menial labor such as hauling or sorting materials can be handled by low-ranking demons or undead, but organizing and cataloging the documents requires beings with intellect. Even with Albedo, Pandora's actor, and myself working tirelessly day and night, we have yet to process even half of the records. There's that much information. Yes. To make matters worse, the destruction of the hidden forces behind Dragon's Dream resulted in the loss of ledgers, indexes, and core documents. We are forced to rebuild the records from scratch, verifying every single piece of material again. I see. Ains could feel a cold sweat that he no longer possessed. He hadn't realized the workload was that monstrous. Truth be told, he had been receiving only Albedo's summarized progress reports without investigating the details himself. But thinking about it now, it made perfect sense. Dragon's Dream was a group whose reputation and influence rivaled that of small nations. Even if their members were few, their reach extended across the world. Their influence stretched deep and wide, and their business in magic item trade alone generated wealth surpassing that of many kingdoms. A history spanning 150 years, and all those records had gone up in flames. It was only natural that every document had to be recreated manually from the ground up. And, of course, there were no computers in this world, everything had to be done by hand. The thought alone made Ains's hollow skull spin. This is really bad. I feel kind of guilty now. A heavy sense of guilt pressed around his skull. His subordinates were drowning in paperwork while he was lying in bed or casually going out to hunt for stress relief. If Demiurge were to suddenly stand up and call me out right now, I'd deserve it. Even as Suzuki Satoru, he'd never faced labor this inhumane, a full week without rest. He wouldn't last 2 days before collapsing. Of course, it wasn't as though he was doing nothing. Final reviews and approvals still went through him. But compared to his subordinates' efforts, that was like a drop in the ocean. He desperately wanted to help directly, but he knew he wasn't skilled enough to handle ledgers or detailed clerical work like the others. I feel bad dumping all this on them, but I can't afford to look incompetent in front of my subordinates. That was something Ains absolutely could not allow. Have you considered hiring local talent for administrative work? I have, Ains-sama, Demiurge replied smoothly, but human capabilities are so pitifully low that involving them would only slow down progress. If there were more individuals of even a fraction of that cooperators' caliber, I might have raised my estimation of humanity a little. Alas, it seems such beings are rare exceptions. I see. Then, what about the deputy? How is he performing? Ah, he is quite an excellent specimen for a human. A wicked smile crept across Demiurge's face, visible even through the gleam of his glasses. Not on the same level as the cooperator, of course, but for a human, he is remarkably capable. He understands the structure of the organization, manages affairs with intelligence and composure, and carries out his duties with admirable efficiency. In my humble opinion, even after Nazarick fully subsumes Dragon's Dream, he would be worth keeping as an operational overseer. I see, then do not lay a hand on him, Demiurge. Do not make the same reckless mistake we did with Monkey Spanner. Yes, my lord. Good. Then, how are things progressing? No matter how many pending matters remain, the search for the powers behind Dragon's Dream cannot remain idle forever. Ains's true thoughts, of course, were far less authoritative. They're working so hard already, maybe I should tell him to ease up a little. But even as that sentiment flickered through his mind, a faint anxiety lingered, born of the unknown guild that had once stood behind Monkey Spanner. If only he knew their guild's name, even that alone would be comforting. They had eliminated Monkey Spanner cleanly enough that their own identity likely remained hidden, but still, in war, information was power. And Ains, having studied Punitomo's PvP strategy compendium back in Yggdrasil, knew that rule better than anyone. He needed to know more. Were there others like Monkey Spanner? If so, how many? And what strength did they still possess? Monkey Spanner's testimony suggested there were no surviving players, but their remnant's power was still uncertain. Even Ains Ulgaun knew that his subordinates alone could easily crush any mid-tier guild, but an upper-tier one might be another story. Yes, Ains-sama. I have already begun preparations regarding that matter. However, since I cannot personally take the field, I've been forced to employ slower, but safer, methods. Oh, preparations, you say? Let's hear them. Yes, Ains-sama. I have made 3 arrangements. 3. Ains froze. 3. He prepared 3 separate operations. This demon worked himself to the bone day and night managing Dragon's Dream, and yet he still found time to design 3 separate plans. Back when Suzuki Satoru was an office worker, just writing 2 pages of a marketing draft would earn him a lecture from his manager. But Demiurge. He was performing miracles between all-nighters. The difference in intelligence felt almost divine. Impressive, you've been working under such pressure and still managed all that. Excellent. Explain. Yes, my lord. First, while reorganizing the archives, I noticed that certain records from the same era were inexplicably incomplete. It seems they erased specific information. But information, Ains-sama, is like a forest. If one part is cut down, the clearing stands out. We are tracing those missing patches to locate suspicious regions. I see, ingenious. Second, we have dispatched adventurers to the major kingdoms to investigate branch families. After Monkey Spanner's death, many branch heads and key figures vanished without a trace. They are almost certainly connected to the same hidden faction. Rather than risk exposing Nazarick's power, we are using local adventurers as proxies to track them. Excellent use of assets. And the third, the Empire, Ains-sama. The Empire. Yes. While its adventurer forces are inferior to the kingdoms, it harbors a thriving underground network known as the Walkers, unlicensed adventurers who accept any job for coin, regardless of pride or honor. I plan to use them to scout the suspicious regions. Originally, I intended to use the Empire as sacrifice, a stage for revealing Nazarik's glory to the world. However, with Dragon's Dream now under our control and its hidden powers still unexposed, I have deemed it wiser to withhold our name for now. Thus, the plan's focus has shifted, from demonstration, to infiltration. Ho! Ains couldn't help but exhale in admiration. As expected of Demiurge. Truly the brain of Nazarik. Every word he spoke resonated with cold precision. Ains had been studying recently, even reading old Yggdrasil manuals to sound more intelligent, but Demiurge's thought process remained leagues above his own. If Ains had been the one planning this, his idea would have been something like, throw out some bait and see what bites. But Demiurge's method was meticulous, layered, and adaptive, reworking an entire imperial plan without hesitation. Is this what it means to be a real tactician? He briefly thought of Ponchal Mo again, the brilliant strategist of Ains Ul Gaun, and a strange, wistful feeling settled over him. Excellent, Demiurge. Your strategy could stand alongside the plans of Punito Mo himself. Such words. Punito Moasama, among the supreme beings, was the most brilliant tactician of all. For me to be compared to him is far too great an honor. Please, withdraw such excessive praise, Ains-sama. No, I stand by it. You are worthy of that comparison. As the ruler of Nazarik and coordinator of the supreme beings, I say this with conviction. Of course, internally, Ains knew he had no right to compare either of them, they were both far beyond his own level. But if words of praise could motivate Demiurge further, then he would gladly offer them. After all, Nazarik's guardians asked for no wages or rewards, they worked tirelessly, out of loyalty alone. If a few kind words could sustain their spirits, Ains would spare none, though he had to be careful not to overuse them, lest they lose their value. If my lord insists, I am deeply, deeply honored, Demiurge said, bowing again. I shall take this blessing as nourishment for the soul and redouble my efforts in service to you. Well, don't overdo it, Ains replied awkwardly. Work too hard, and you might lose sight of your surroundings. Take rest when you deem it necessary. That's an order. Yes, my lord. But please rest assured, I have already been taking adequate rest. You have. Ains's non-existent jaw nearly dropped. He's been taking rest. With that workload. How? Was he somehow working as a form of relaxation? No matter how Ains tried to interpret it, the statement bordered on insanity. And yet, something felt off. Ains couldn't shake the feeling. Demiurge's brilliance was undeniable, his loyalty unwavering, and yet, there was this subtle wrongness. It wasn't ignorance, he knew something was missing. But what? It was like searching the house for a hat already sitting on his head. What had he overlooked? No matter how hard he thought, the answer wouldn't come. Unsettled, Ains buried the feeling deep in the recesses of his mind, and the conversation moved on. 82 Even amid shaking and confusion 5. Chapter 82. Even amid shaking and confusion 5. Deep within the Azerlija mountain range lay a hidden paradise, Shinshi, one of the legends, whispered of by the people of this world. And still, it remained there, unchanged. Its citizens continued their daily labors, its faithful carried out their assigned duties to maintain the city. For more than a century, nothing had truly shifted. Perhaps the population had grown slightly, the infrastructure expanded a little, but even when compared to 150 years ago, there was little difference. Even now, after the god who had slumbered beside them for so long had finally awakened, Shinshi remained the same. The return of the divine was kept secret, and life in the holy city went on as peacefully as ever. Yet among its highest officials, the high priests, unmistakable change had begun. Preparations are nearly complete, Lady Aya confirmed. It began with the high priests. There were 12 of them. For a time, their number had fallen to 11, but with the god's return, the once-fallen monkey spanner was resurrected, restoring their full ranks. These 12, excluding the god himself, were the supreme power of Shinshi, its most exalted beings. In the past 200 years, never once had all 12 moved together. Even during the chaos 180 years ago, or during the great exodus that followed, only a few had taken action. The last time all 12 had stirred in unison was right after their god had fallen into slumber, 2 centuries ago, when they were each assigned to oversee their departments. But now that the god had awakened, and declared he would use them, they could no longer remain bound to their posts. Still, they could not simply abandon their duties. The process of succession and transfer required time. It seems the transition took longer than expected. Was there a problem? Our positions are not easily replaced. Passing on the duties of a being at level 100 was no trivial matter. Only another of equal power could truly take over. Even dividing the responsibilities would require subordinates of at least level 80, rare even within Shinshi. And among the faithful, few possessed the talent or power to inherit a high priest's role. Training successors and allowing them to adapt demanded yet more time. Even now, some of the process remained unfinished. The chief high priest, Drake, and several others had not yet completed their handovers, nor even chosen their replacements. However, I and 6 of the others have finished our transitions. We can act at any time. If you wish, I will summon them immediately. That won't be necessary. They're already in motion. What? Drake froze. Already in motion. Without his knowledge. It was true that after finishing their succession work, the others had returned to their duties, but the authority to deploy them belonged to Aya, not him. Still, he hadn't imagined they would already be acting under her orders. You gave no word of this to me. Am I required to report every move I make to you? Number, Lady Aya. Then see to your own duties, Drake. There was no need to ask which of the two held higher authority, the chief high priest or the administrator of Shinshi and the god's proxy, Aya. The difference was absolute. If the god had not yet returned, Drake might have protested. But now that the Divine One had awakened, all hierarchies reverted to their true order, the one decreed by the god himself. So Drake accepted it without complaint. Still, may I ask just one thing? Please tell me where they were sent. As chief high priest, I'm responsible for tracking their movements. Hey, even if I said nothing, you'll find out soon enough. Pardon. Aya's omniscience did not extend beyond Shinshi's borders. Yet for the last 2 centuries, she had not been idle as many assumed. If her domain, her guild's reach, did not extend far enough, then she simply stretched it further. Though she could not leave the divine city, though she could not step outside the heavenly chamber unless her master, Tiamat, summoned her, still, everything within Shinshi lay within her grasp. All beings beneath the Supreme Master, Tiamat, functioned as her hands and feet. Thus, not only Drake but all who acted within Shinshi moved as she willed. And for whose sake she willed it, that needed no explanation. The Lord himself is on the move, Drake. Question mark exclamation mark. What did you say? He intends to meet those who dare to lay hands on what is his. Wait, you mean, it can't be. It's exactly as you think. Aya smiled, and even through the high priest's scaled face, his alarm was unmistakable. The Lord is moving toward the capital of a nation called the Re-Estais Kingdom. Tiamat could only marvel, again and again. Magnificent. Before him stretched an endless sea of wheat fields, swaying under the sun. Golden stalks shimmered with radiant light, their rippling motion in the wind striking him with a beauty no words could truly capture. Not even the most perfect virtual reality could have evoked such a feeling, this splendor of gold seen with his own eyes, the soft whisper of wind brushing through the fields reaching his ears, and even the faint, nostalgic scent of the countryside filling his chest. To think such a world exists. The one who made this truly deserves to be called a god. Even knowing this was reality, not simulation, Tiamat could not suppress his awe. Back in the modern age he once lived in, corporations often flaunted phrases like, technology of the gods, or, the realm of divinity. With robotics, cloning, prosthetics, virtual reality, and life extension technologies, humanity claimed to have recreated godlike miracles through science. But could they still boast such nonsense after seeing this world? If they truly wielded divine power, the skies of his world wouldn't have been gray with pollution or stained by acid rain, but instead as clear and clean as this, with drifting clouds and a radiant sun shining down upon the land. The underground kingdom's NPCs worship him as a god, but perhaps the one who created this world as the true deity. Bathed in the grace of such pure nature, even Tiamat, once faithless, felt something close to devotion stirring within him. Still, he couldn't enjoy the scenery without reservation. A faint frown touched his face. Demons, I'm still not sure. Lately, Tiamat's thoughts had been consumed by the nature of his enemy. You can't fight an opponent you don't understand. Only by knowing their power can one prepare for war. In Yggdrasil, such things had always been clear. System messages announced declarations of war, invasions, and guild hostilities. Even if he didn't know every individual member of an enemy guild, public databases revealed most essential information: guild size, headquarters, alignment, and combat focus. Strategy could be built upon that foundation. But now, in this world that resembled reality, there were no such systems to rely on. Within Shinshi, the guild console still functioned, but outside of it, only personal magic and skills remained usable, no system menus, no command interfaces. Because of that, identifying the enemy was a frustrating ordeal. He had no idea which guild he was facing. If they're using demons as NPCs, then it must be an evil-aligned guild. That narrows it down a little. Still, there weren't many evil-aligned guilds in Yggdrasil. To be precise, few guilds intentionally kept a negative karma alignment. As an MMORPG, Yggdrasil had been structured around the eternal conflict between good and evil, and as usual, narrative design favored the light. Players who leaned toward good gained bonuses, those aligned with evil were punished, marginalized, and often hunted for sport. Among them, those who chose heteromorphic races suffered even more, treated not as players, but as rare monsters carrying valuable loot and experience points. Thus, few guilds ever embraced evil. And if the enemy truly used demons as their primary NPC race, their karma rating had to be -100 or lower, true extremists of corruption. Even among those, only a handful could rival or threaten the 12 divines. Muspelheims, Pandemonium, Helheims, Ains Ulgaun, Jotunheims, Giant, and then, Dark Soul, Alifgard, League of Villains, maybe 4 or 5 more beyond that. Including neutral or good-aligned guilds would triple that number, but among evil heteromorphic guilds, only these 6 truly stood out, each one powerful enough to shake the world. 2 of them weren't alliances but single guilds, whose strength and unity rivaled even grand coalitions. Of course, by the end of Yggdrasil, most of their members had quit, leaving hollow shells behind, just like the 12 divines themselves. With only one remaining player, comparing which side was better off was meaningless. By that stage, no one had the strength left for war. They simply clung to their legacies, exchanging wistful talk about faded glory. Still, if the adversary belonged to one of those guilds and no player was actively leading them, then negotiation was impossible. But if a player was still commanding them, and had struck without realizing who the 12 were, then perhaps there was room for dialogue. Of course, only after he made them pay the proper price. Though it could all just be an act. The people of this world had a rather ambiguous concept of what a demon was. Even the local guides he questioned on the journey here, who had grown strangely obedient over time, admitted they hadn't seen one directly. Just rumors of horns and wings. That alone wasn't proof of anything. Yggdrasil had countless transformation items capable of altering one's appearance. Perhaps the enemy had disguised themselves as demons to obscure their identity. But the more he thought about it, the more endless the possibilities became. At last, Tiamat sighed and abandoned the line of thought. Well, I'll find out when I meet them. After all, that was why he was heading to the place where this demon had appeared. Even if it turned out to be a nest of enemies, as long as it wasn't the core of their guild base, he was confident he could escape. He wasn't foolish enough to underestimate them. He had brought his full battle set, his guild relics, even a world item, just in case. And as his keen eyes scanned the horizon, the distant silhouette of a vast city began to rise. The royal capital of the Re-Estais kingdom, Re-Estais itself, slowly came into view. 83. Returning once more. 1. Chapter 83. Returning once more. 1. As the royal capital, Re-Estais, drew closer, the 3 members of Dragon's Dream began to grow increasingly uneasy. They had never planned on returning here. Originally, their goal was to travel to the Azerlija Mountains to find the roots of their family, perhaps the true origin of their lineage hidden somewhere deep within. However, along the way, they happened to encounter a mysterious young boy who introduced himself as Tite, a being whose divine power and abilities were beyond comprehension. One thing led to another, and they ended up traveling together, eventually reaching the dwarven kingdom built within the Azerlija range. But when they arrived, the dwarves were under attack by a horde of monsters called Quaggoa, and the group was drawn into the conflict. They accepted a request to help eliminate the creatures, but the results were strange. For reasons they could not explain, the Quaggoa who had surrounded them vanished as if they were mere mirages, leaving behind only molten tunnels, scorched and melted as if dozens of red dragons had rampaged through. Naturally, not a single trace of the Quaggoa remained. Afterward, unable to make sense of the situation, they simply left the mountains. Searching the area was impossible, and with the dwarves in chaos, there was no aid to be found. In the end, as per the party leader Dean's suggestion, they all decided to continue following the mysterious boy Tite, acting as his guides, even if none of them truly understood why. Hey, Dean, you really think this is okay? What do you mean? Colton, unable to hide his restlessness, spoke in a hurried tone. They were now traveling along the main road leading toward the capital. For some reason, Tite was walking far behind, absorbed in the sight of the fields and plains as though seeing them for the first time, despite the fact they had been looking at the same scenery for days. Because of that, they too were forced to slow their pace, their voices kept low. Didn't we go to the mountains to find our clan's origin? But we didn't find anything, and now we're just heading back to the capital. You idiot. We already found it. Huh. Dean frowned. The urge to smack Colton on the back of his head was strong. Over the weeks since they met Tite, Dean had watched the boy closely, and reached one conclusion. That boy's divine power was beyond imagination, and his youthful, almost angelic beauty only added to the mystery. Someone like that would have been famous anywhere in the world. Yet, he appeared out of nowhere, unnoticed by anyone, and just happened to meet them on their way to the Azerlija Mountains. That wasn't coincidence, it couldn't be. Huh. I just thought, he's some kind of prodigy, right? Someone with insane divine power. If we brought him to the theocracy, he'd probably become someone important real fast. I figured it'd be smart to stay close, might pay off later. You brainless fool, is that head of yours just a helmet rack? What? Hey. What's your problem? As Colton flinched and backed away, Dean let out a frustrated sigh and glanced toward Rohaim, who had been silently following behind them. Rohaim, what do you think? Well, I'd say you're right, Dean. That boy must have come from the main family. Exactly. You feel it too, don't you? Yes. Otherwise, none of this would make sense. Rohaim nodded slightly, though his shoulders trembled faintly. Back in the dwarven city, when Tite had suddenly vanished, and moments later, an overwhelming surge of magic erupted throughout the caverns. It was a scale of power he couldn't begin to grasp, vast enough to make his entire body freeze in terror. Then, after several minutes, Tite reappeared, smiling gently as if nothing had happened, saying he had just gone to the restroom. At that moment, Rohaim understood why Dean treated the boy with such reverence, almost like worship. The divine power alone was extraordinary, but the presence of such immense, transcendent magic as well, there was something deeply unsettling behind that calm expression. A being capable of both supreme divinity and immense magic, surely not human. And their encounter. Too deliberate to be chance. Rohaim realized then that this boy had sought them out. And if there was any transcendent being capable of finding them in the Azerlija Mountains, one who might still bear goodwill toward them, then there was only one possible origin. The source of their great lineage. The true ancestral house. The root of their family's power, the one that had guided their patriarchs for generations and welcomed chosen adventurers into its fold. Tite had to be from there. And if I had to guess, Rohaim murmured, he's probably one of the same kind as our former patriarch. Yeah, Dean agreed. That unfathomable presence we felt from Lord Monkey Spanner, I sense the same from him. Really? I can't tell at all. That's why your head's nothing but a helmet stand, you dolt. Ow. Why'd you hit me? Dean smacked Colton on the head again in frustration, then quietly turned to look behind them. The black-haired, black-eyed boy trailed after them, gazing absently at the sky, the plains, and the distant mountains with a faint, nostalgic expression. He exuded none of Monkey Spanner's crushing charisma or aura of command, yet Dean could feel it. That same level of power. A divine force and mastery over mightier holy magic strong enough to heal, restore, and empower others to inhuman levels, magic that even the theocracy itself had never heard of. Without a doubt, the boy was the same kind of being as their late patriarch. Which meant only one thing, this boy was following them not by chance, but for a purpose. To investigate, or perhaps resolve, the current crisis. Otherwise, he'd have no reason to contact us at all, Dean thought grimly. Indeed, thinking back, after Lord Monkeyspanner's death, their escape from the capital had been too well timed. Almost as if someone from the main house had already known of the impending danger. Maybe the demon that killed their patriarch hadn't been targeting the kingdom at all. Maybe its true goal was the dragon's dream family itself. It wasn't an impossible story. For the past 150 years, Dragon's Dream had built up countless achievements to become a great house. It was only natural that such success would draw envy and resentment from others. Moreover, when necessary, they had involved themselves in secret conflicts, creating grudges along the way. But what crushed all that opposition was the power of the clan itself. While today they possessed wealth and influence in abundance, in the beginning, Dragon's Dream had relied entirely on the overwhelming might of its clan head, power capable of breaking the heavens and splitting the earth. For generations, every head of the family had inherited that same transcendent strength. They were beings who didn't seem like they could die, even if you killed them. And yet, Monkey Spanner L. Dragon's Dream was assassinated. Despite his power, no one knew how he died, only his belongings had been thrown back. It was obvious that something in the shadows had been concealed. In short, it was a matter grave enough for the root of the clan to personally intervene. Heading to Re-Estais must be for that reason. But then, why won't he tell us the truth? That question gnawed at Dean's mind. They were members of the clan, they had entered it as children and dedicated their lives to it. They would gladly take on missions that were sure to end in death if it meant serving their house. And yet, the boy would not tell them anything. Why? No matter what was asked or ordered, they would obey, even if it cost them their lives. Was it possible the boy suspected they had already been influenced by the enemy? If so, why bring them along? Was this surveillance? Or something else entirely? Dean could not stop himself from overthinking. Should we just enter the capital like this? Into the clan that's now controlled by an unknown enemy, a place that could very well be a trap. His anxiety deepened. Then, he felt a tap on his shoulder. What the? But when he turned, he froze. It wasn't Rohaim or Colton, it was the boy himself. Tite, whom they believed had come from the very source of the clan. He'd been walking far behind them just moments ago, why was he here now? Startled, Dean quickly composed himself. Why yes, my lord. Did you need something? Oh, no, it's nothing serious. Tite paused, as if hesitating. There was an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his expression, which caught Dean's attention. I was just wondering, are you really planning to enter the capital like this? Pardon. Didn't you say we were heading for the capital? Ah, yes, I did say that, but entering directly feels inappropriate. Let's just say I have other matters to attend to first. The boy's indecision was rare and unnerving. They were practically at the capital's gates now, mere hours away. What could be troubling him at this point? Dean forced himself to stay patient. Whatever it may be, please tell us. We'll follow your will, Lord Tite. Oh, would you really? Tite smiled, brightly. A radiant smile, like a million black roses blooming at once. His flawless face seemed to glow with a divine light, and Dean instinctively flinched. Even a man like him, who had no family but many lovers, felt momentarily entranced by such beauty. But the next words brought him back to reality. The truth is, I have some business with the Dragon's Dream clan you belong to. But due to certain circumstances, I can't enter the capital myself. Could you perhaps contact someone who knows the current situation there? That's him. Dean hesitated. Even now, Tite was concealing his true identity. He already knew they were members of Dragon's Dream, so why pretend otherwise? Why this charade? But Dean quickly reasoned with himself. Every clan head, including the late Monkey Spanner, had shared a strange habit of secrecy. Despite their power and charisma being obvious to anyone, they seldom revealed their full abilities. Perhaps Tite was the same. Satisfied with that thought, Dean nodded. It's possible. We don't even need to enter the capital. Using our emergency communication network, we can contact the clan from here. Is that so? That's perfect. Then, could I ask you to do me a favor? Ah, yes, but using it here might take a bit of preparation. Using an emergency communication scroll required some setup. It wasn't that there were strict limitations, but before exchanging messages, a secure ritual was needed. A small altar and a magic circle had to be prepared to prevent any unauthorized interception of the transmission midway. Will it take long? Not really. Just the time to set up the altar and inscribe the circle. But, may I ask what business you have with our clan? It's nothing serious. I just need to confirm something. But I suppose you wouldn't easily believe me like this. Tite murmured softly, scratching his head as if troubled. He seemed to hesitate, then moved his lips soundlessly, muttering words that could only be guessed as a form of telepathic exchange. After a few moments, he reached into his coat, rummaging through his belongings, and finally pulled out a small pendant, no larger than his palm. If it's hard to believe, I was told to show you this. What do you think? That's. Dean's eyes widened in disbelief. A dragon roaring toward the heavens, an emblem adorned with gold and gemstones. He recognized it immediately. That was the seal once used by the first head of the house, a symbol still displayed in the clan's main hall. It wasn't known for its magical strength, but it was a symbol of authority, used solely by the current head of Dragon's Dream and the one appointed as party leader. It represented the weight of their position and their belonging to the clan. A replica? No, impossible. It was too perfect. Even the faint aura of magic emanating from it was identical to the real thing. To confirm, Dean extended a trembling hand toward the pendant. Tite didn't move away, and Dean carefully touched the emblem and whispered the activation word. Manifestation. Whoosh. A burst of dazzling golden light erupted. The red gemstone eyes of the dragon engraved on the pendant gleamed vividly, and moments later, a projection of the same emblem appeared above the pendant, magnified and radiant. A dragon with blazing crimson eyes, roaring toward the heavens. The crest of the great house of Dragon's Dream. Dean's eyes welled with tears. Ah. That's real, isn't it? Rohaim and Colton, who had been watching from behind in stunned silence, gasped aloud, eyes wide with disbelief. There could be no mistake. The clan's true crest, no imitation could ever reproduce it. Even though the emblem only projected the crest, the original artifact was said to have been a divinity or relic, wielded by the first and successive heads of the house, capable of casting heightier protective and enhancement magic at will. There could be no other like it in the world. If another truly existed, it could only have been forged by the root of the clan itself. Dean dropped to his knees. The other two quickly followed, kneeling beside him without hesitation. We bow before the root of our house. 150 years had passed since the founding of the great house, and just as its ruin loomed over the world, the root of the clan had returned. 84. Returning once more to. Chapter 84. Returning once more to. Dean, along with Rohaim and Colton, immediately straightened their posture. It wasn't just their manners that changed, their hearts did too. Deep down, they had accepted it. The boy before them was the root of their clan, the one to whom they owed reverence. Once they acknowledged the truth, they felt strangely at ease. They had suspected a connection from the start, but not having any confirmation had kept them on edge. Now that it was out in the open, the anxiety that had lingered in their chests finally faded away. From that point on, everything moved smoothly. Without a hint of doubt, the three began preparing the site. They pulled a tent from their magic pouch, set up the ground, erected a small altar, and drew a magic circle. There wasn't even a thought of, what if, for who would dare doubt the one who had come from the very root of their bloodline? To doubt him would be worse than death. Preparations are complete, Lord Tite. Are they? Yes. Once we place the scroll and activate the magic circle, the transmission sealed within the scroll will be triggered. Normally, spoken messages can be intercepted, but by using this dual scroll communication method, the risk is greatly reduced. However, once we activate our scroll, the other side must also activate theirs for the link to form, so there may be a brief delay. How long would that take? We all carry emergency scrolls on us, but if the person is staying at the main estate, it might not be within immediate reach. Still, since they're checked several times a day, we should receive a response within an hour at most, assuming nothing has gone wrong. Dean bowed respectfully. His tone and manner carried a level of deference far beyond before. Previously, he had treated Tite as someone extraordinary, now, he treated him as a superior. Rohaim and Colton were no different. Their eyes glimmered with reverence. The truth was undeniable now. This young man, no, this being who appeared to be a boy, was someone from the root of Dragon's Dream, a figure from the very origin of their lineage. They had a mountain of questions. The root of the clan had always been a mystery, whispered of but never confirmed. Though rumors of a hidden, true family had followed every generation of clan heads, beings of transcendental power, none had ever been verified. And yet, faced with that truth incarnate, they held their tongues. Even Dean, who as party leader had always spoken freely before the clan head, did not dare speak carelessly now. I see, but what if we can't establish a connection? Dean hesitated, his face darkening. Then, that would mean there's no one left at the main house to answer us. His words trailed off heavily. He thought of Rot, the youngest, who had sent them that final warning. If the scroll failed to connect, that would mean even Rot, perhaps the last survivor, was gone. In truth, the fact that the root had sent someone already meant the clan's danger was real and imminent. Judging from Tite's behavior, he seemed to be communicating with someone else, someone above him. Clearly, he already knew more than they did. This was no mere inquiry, it was a confirmation. A way to determine whether the main branch of the Dragon's Dream family seated within the royal capital of Re-Estais, had already fallen into enemy hands. Dean prayed inwardly that Rot was still alive as he placed the scroll on the altar. The parchment, made from dragonhide, began to glow faintly as it absorbed magical energy. Seeing it, Dean let out a slow, heavy sigh. So, there really hasn't been any contact since then. Well, they say no news is good news, right? Let's wait a bit. Yes. And in the meantime, let's rest. We should stay prepared, just in case something happens. Understood. Tite glanced at the altar once, then sat down quietly. He gazed into the air and began moving his lips again, clearly sending another transmission. Dean watched him with a conflicted expression. There was no doubt in his mind that Tite was communicating with the true, hidden power that had always stood behind their clan. He too had countless questions, more than anyone else. As leader of Dragon's Dreams adventuring party, Dean had seen more than most, but that only meant he had more reasons to be curious. The mysterious absence of the clan's higher heads, the untraceable origins of countless magical items, the almost prophetic flow of information, the unbroken 150-year legacy. The clan was shrouded in too many secrets, secrets no head had ever explained. Now, the answer sat right before his eyes. And yet, his respect for the one before him made it impossible to ask. Even Dean, the man who had once spoken freely to the clan head himself, found he could not utter a single word to this boy named Tite, whom he had known for less than a month. Still, his curiosity and doubts outweighed his fear. Stammering a little, Dean addressed Tite, who was moving his lips toward empty air. Excuse me, Lord Tite. What is it? Did a reply come through? No, not that. I just have a question, if it's not a bother, could you answer? Pardon. Tite looked puzzled, closed his mouth for a moment, then let his lips move again. After a brief, considering look, he nodded. Yes. I'll answer what I can. Thaden, do you happen to know Senior Scal? Scal? Who is that? Ah. At Tite's plainly unfamiliar response, Dean's shoulders sagged. He clenched his teeth and pressed on. He was the previous leader of the Dragon's Dream Party, a senior of mine. After he retired, he suddenly vanished without a word, saying he would seek out the clan's root. I wondered if you might know. Scal, you say. One moment. Tite once more moved his lips toward the empty air. Was he using a transmission again? He kept his gaze raised and his lips shifting for several dozen seconds, then made a somewhat awkward face. He exists. Yes, a man named Scal is in Shinshi. Really? So Senior Scal actually reached that place. I'd heard his last words were that he was heading for the Azerlija Mountains, but to think he truly made it there. Dean was overcome, unable to continue. In his younger days, Scal had been his life's goal. The clan heads always stood in a realm beyond realms, impossible to catch up to, but Scal, the sword demon, whose fame shook the land back when Dean was still a novice, had been his beacon. Then, one day, Scal abruptly announced his retirement and disappeared. Not only the clan but the entire kingdom stirred. An adventurer recognized as a hero by the kingdom, the empire, the theocracy, the dragon kingdom, and even the council state had vanished overnight. Once, adventurers across the continent had scoured the land seeking the missing hero. Even so, Dean had believed. He'd believed in the rumors within the clan about the legend of the Azerlija Mountains, and that Scal, who'd gone to seek that legend, must have reached it, but as years passed, he himself had begun to file it away as mere myth. And yet Scal had reached it. Is he doing well? I'm ashamed to ask, Lord Tite, but I must know, please, at least tell me he's safe. Well, that's, how should I put it? Tite's expression shifted, ambiguous, perhaps a touch sympathetic. After a moment's decision, he spoke. That person, Scal, I'm told he's currently in seclusion, under criticism after a string of defeats. Aside from that, there's no particular issue with his safety. A string of defeats. Dean's face went blank. Defeats. Was there any word that fit Scal less? He had once shaken the entire continent, been hailed a hero by 5 nations, slain demon gods, dispersed rampaging hordes. What in the world had happened to him for such a thing to be said? But Tite offered nothing further, and Dean, feeling it would be rude to pry more, swallowed his regret and held his tongue. Even so, he had learned much from that brief exchange. Senior Scal was alive, that alone brought joy. But the word, Shinshi, that Tite spoke struck him like a bolt. Shinshi. The clan's hidden power would not bear such a name lightly. City, was a term used for a settlement of considerable size, even a fortified one. Which meant the clan's backing might be far greater than he had ever imagined. It was possible that Dragon's Dream, the great clan, whose influence reached across the continent, was, compared to the true root, only a small part. The thought sent a shock like lightning through Dean's body. Could that be? Could the clan that has endured 150 years, Dragon's Dream, whose reach spans the continent, be merely a fragment? Is that truly possible? Before he could think further on that possibility, the scroll set upon the altar flared with bright light. And from beyond it came a feeble voice. The moment the voice came through the scroll, its tone was faint and trembling. Quote. Who's contacting me? Senior Dean, Senior Colton, Senior Rohaim, or Senior Alvin. Who is it? Quote. Rot. You're alive. At that voice, Colton reacted immediately. His long-lost junior, whom they'd half expected to be dead, was still breathing. He tried to speak again, but before he could, Dean's rough, calloused hand clamped over his mouth. Colton-senpai. Is that you? It's me. I'm the one calling, Rot. Senior Dean. Even you, why? Just the sound of that weak voice told Dean how much life had drained out of him. Dean glanced back at Tite, and when the boy nodded silently, he continued. It's been more than a week. We heard the capital was in danger and laid low for a while, but things seemed to calm down, so we came back. How's the clan holding up? Why did you come back, Senior? Dean froze. That wasn't the reply he'd expected. It was a whisper thick with grief and accusation. And then, Rot's next words turned his blood cold. The clan is finished. It's no longer ours anymore. Please, Senior, run. As fast and as far as you can. Leave the country if you must. What are you saying, Rot? What happened to the clan? Tell me. There's no time to explain. That demon could be watching any moment. He might already be listening. Please, Senior, hurry. Ah. Rot. Hey. Answer me, Rot. His shout was desperate, but the voice on the other side was gone. A strangled cry had cut off mid-sentence, and then, after several seconds of static silence, a different voice came through. So this is how it worked. An altar, a magic circle, and enchanted items to block interference. Quite the clever setup. I'll have to remember this. That man was useful after all. The new voice was smooth and cold, yet laced with a lilting amusement that made their spines crawl. It wasn't human, it couldn't be. But Dean trembled not with fear, but rage. Whoever this was had done something to Rot. Whoever they were likely the very one behind the fall of the clan. Who are you? Me. I'd love to tell you, but wouldn't that spoil the fun? Besides, talking through this thing isn't nearly as satisfying, is it? Especially when we're so very close. That final sentence wasn't echoing through the scroll anymore, it was whispering directly beside his ear. Dean's instinct screamed a warning. He stumbled back from the altar, just as the parchment flared, a black line tearing through it like a rift in space. The tear widened, gaping open like the maw of a beast, and from it emerged a hand clad in a crimson and white suit sleeve. Then the rest of the figure stepped out, tall, gaunt, with elongated ears and a twisted grin that split his face nearly to the ears. A crimson striped tail coiled behind him, chitinous and monstrous. Quote. I thought I'd introduce myself in person, the demon said, smiling as if savoring their horror. Good evening, members of Dragon's Dream. Asterisk. I'm really sorry for the delay, guys. I've been dealing with so many problems these past few days. I went to my mother's place, where a strong earthquake struck. Our house was demolished. I really need your help, even the smallest support means a lot to us. Thank you for understanding. This is my PayPal, blankweplay@gmail.com. 85 Returning once more 3. Chapter 85, Returning once more 3. At the appearance of the demon, the three of them froze. No, more than that. They didn't even have the chance to tremble. Their bodies turned to stone the instant it appeared. They were seasoned adventurers, veterans who, at the first sign of an ambush, would instinctively draw weapons, cast spells, and brace for combat. But now, they couldn't move. Quote, question mark, exclamation mark, quote. What? From the moment the demon emerged, not a single finger would obey them. It wasn't the effect of magic or martial arts. There had been no spell cast, no technique used, yet their bodies refused to respond. Like mice before a cat, or frogs before a snake, their instincts simply surrendered. Before this overwhelming predator, their bodies reacted on their own, paralyzed by sheer dread. If they had been mere civilians, weak, ignorant, Ordinary, it might have been better. A normal person wouldn't even understand what was happening. But they were too strong to be ignorant and too weak to endure. And so, they could feel it all. The crushing weight of that demonic presence, suffocating every nerve. Only Dean, the strongest among them, managed to force his stiff lips and tongue to move, stammering out a question. Why you, what are you? Me. The demon replied smoothly. Before I answer, I must ask that you quietly listen. I am nothing more than a humble servant, a pitiful vassal serving my most exalted and glorious master. You may call me, Yaldabaoth. Why Yaldabaoth? Dean shouted. That name, he had heard it before. The one who murdered their clan lord, Monkey Spanner Eldragon's dream. The great demon, now called the Demon Lord, rumored to exceed level 200. To think that monster would appear here. It was true then, the demons had targeted the clan. Rot's warning had been right. The corruption had already begun back then. Dean's eyes widened in fury. Oh, you know me. Ah, of course, he must have told you beforehand. As expected of him, quite capable indeed. I like that. I appreciate those with value. You bastard. You're the one who killed the Lord. The Lord. Ah, that monkey, you mean. Yaldabaoth tilted his head in mock recollection. A flicker of golden light crossed his mind's eye, the final moments of his prey, the desperate resistance, the futile yet impressive last stand. He smirked. Yes, yes. He was strong indeed. His last struggle was magnificent. A fitting end for the head of a great family. Of course, he still died in the end. You demon. And now, the demon continued, his grin stretching unnaturally wide behind his thin, round glasses, I must thank you. The three, trembling with rage, could only glare as Yaldabaoth bowed theatrically, one hand to his chest, his back bent with mocking grace. It was such an exaggerated gesture that the mockery behind it was unmistakable. Thank us. For what? Dean managed to grit out. Why, for your affiliation, of course. You were members of, what was it? Ah yes, Dragon's Dream. He chuckled softly. We recently took over your clan. After your leader and guiding center fell, your house descended into chaos. So, naturally, we decided to adopt it. And surely, we should offer gratitude to those who raised such a delicious morsel for us to consume. Dean clenched his jaw until it cracked. He was shaking, not from fear, but fury. Their clan, 150 years of legacy, of honor and contribution to the continent, was being spoken of as nothing more than food. The rage boiled inside him until his face turned crimson and veins bulged on his forehead, but still, his body would not move. His magical equipment should have resisted any paralysis. No curse had been cast. So why couldn't he move? Damn you, what did you do to us? Oh, I didn't do anything, really. Well, perhaps just one little trick. A simple command. You see, my word of command is particularly effective on lesser beings. Word of command. It was Rohaim who cried out this time, his voice filled with disbelief. He was as furious as Dean, yet what the demon said was beyond comprehension. Word of command, language that manifests reality through the power of speech. When a magician casts a spell, it follows a formula. When a priest performs a miracle, it follows divine order. But this was different. This was not calculation, this was declaration. When someone who wields word of command says, die, the world obeys. When they say, do not move, the body stops. When they say, fall, the skies themselves bend to that will. Such power existed only in myth, abilities said to belong to demon gods or true dragons. Yet this creature, this thing, was using it casually. Rohaim's face went pale, drained of all color, and darkened with despair. Word of command, that kind of power, that can't be real. Now, don't strain yourselves. I've only restricted your movement. If you force yourselves too hard, you might damage those precious bodies of yours. You see, since your clan now belongs to us, your valuable property. You should take care of yourselves. Why, you bastard. Colton gritted his teeth so hard that veins bulged on his neck. To be insulted like that, to be owned, how could anyone stay calm? But no matter how he tried, his body wouldn't move. He gathered his strength, invoked his talent, lightning crackling over his skin, and yet, not a single finger obeyed. With just one word, that monster, Yaldabaoth, had subdued them all, Dean, Rohaim, and Colton alike. Sweat poured down their faces, veins stood out, and their eyes burned with rage, but they couldn't move an inch before the sneering demon. They were heroes in their own right. But the being before them, a great demon, one said to exceed level 200, was simply on another plane. Was this the end? Despair shadowed their faces. Now then, Yaldabaoth continued pleasantly, for your sake, we've prepared a very special reception. You may resist as much as you wish. You're valuable assets, but as long as you don't die, there's plenty we can do with you. Personally, though, I prefer when my guests struggle. Submission without resistance is ever so boring. KHH. The crushing malice of the great demon pressed down on them. This was him, the one who slew Lord Monkey Spanner. They had refused to believe the stories before, but now that the monster stood before them, denial was impossible. The great demon was real. Against this immensity of hatred and power, the pride and will of the once great clan bent like reeds in a storm. And yet, none of them knelt. Even if they could only stand for a moment before death, they were still members of the great clan, adventurers among the finest in the world. Their legs trembled, their knees threatened to buckle. But they forced themselves upright, refusing to bow. Yaldabaoth, no, Demiurge, smiled wider. Splendid. Truly splendid. You do not disappoint me. He liked humans. Even filthy ones. But his favorites were the shining kind, the ones who believed, endured, and rose again. Among the crawling vermin of humanity, such rare lights fascinated him. Such beings did not break easily. They did not fall easily. That made them perfect. He delighted in breaking them. To torment them until they screamed, to drive them into despair, to see them collapse, crawling like worms and licking his shoes like dogs, that was Demiurge's idea of love. Every act must be done with sincerity, after all. Without love, true pleasure could not be born. Just as Mare claimed that training requires love, Demiurge believed torture required it too. Only through love could he feel such ecstasy. He had not been allowed to play with Rot. Ain Sama's command forbade it. But many of the Dragon's Dream members had proved excellent subjects. Thanks to them, his hobbies had been quite fulfilling. And these three before him, these stubborn, radiant souls, they would be the best of them all. Breaking their will would be exquisite. And it would be a long time before he found new toys as fine as these. Demiurge's angular face lit with a pure, childlike smile, one steeped in unfiltered malice. The three were once again overwhelmed, crushed by that beautiful horror. Excellent. Truly excellent. Now then, shall we be going? There's someone who's very eager to meet you. I'm sure you'll be thrilled when you see who it is. Come along, now. He raised his hand, intending to open a portal, to subdue them fully, transport them, and report directly to Ain Sama afterward. But before the rift could form, a voice came from the corner, quiet, unhurried, and utterly calm. A boy, who had been watching silently all along. Someone Demiurge hadn't even noticed. Close it, Aya. The voice was soft, but the moment it was spoken, the overwhelming, suffocating evil that filled the air vanished without a trace. Asterisk 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 asterisk. If you want to read 10 advanced chapters ahead, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/vanity01.